$200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure.
Now you're playing with power, superpower.
You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES.
Only on Super NES.
You're listening to the SNES podcast with your host, Soul Blazer.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Super NES Podcast, episode number 159 this time around. Thank you again, as always, for joining us. I am Greg, one of your two regular co-hosts, joined by my other regular co-host, Joe.
Hello.
And we are again very honored and very pleased to have a guest host with us for this episode. Long time away from the podcast, but definitely definitely one of the best guys to have on here because of the wealth of knowledge and information that he always brings with us. I'm very pleased to welcome back Nicholas to the podcast again. So how's it going, Nick?
The honor's all mine, Greg. Nice to be here. Everything's going great. How about you?
Pretty good, all things considered. I mean, staying safe, staying healthy. I think that's the best that any of us out there right now can wish for. So
Absolutely.
Nick, we'll give you a chance in the podcast to talk about any current stuff you want to plug or whatnot. But since it has been a while, do you mind giving the listeners, maybe for anybody out there who's new to the podcast or anybody out there who's been a while, do you mind just giving a quick summary like about some of your background interests and just real quick how you came to really have a big interest in like pinball tables?
Sure. So I do a whole lot with pinball. Everything from building custom games to even building a couple of commercial games. But the thing that really got me into it was my parents. When I was young, we would stop into arcades. My parents were very into arcade games and pinball, and they would let us as kids go play whatever, and really instilled a love of the game in me. And I've been really excited to learn about the internals of the games. I've been fixing pinballs for about a decade now, and it's very rewarding to take a machine that's been dead for many years or even decades in some cases and bring it back to life. So that's my main interest. And then I also do a lot with building games, as I mentioned, and I'll talk more about those at the end. But that's really where pinball comes in. It's a big component of my life because of all that stuff.
Yeah. Because I remember playing a lot of pinball as a kid, like in arcades, and it's kind of really unfortunate these days because it's like pinball is very hard to find anymore out there, like places that actually have new tables, because it's like, at least like in my area, the only places that have pinball tables would either be like some dedicated like barcade slash classic arcades, or curiously enough, the airport gaming lounge stores like pinball tables in there. So, but yeah, just like but even those places, it's older tables. It's like I know companies like Stern are still making new tables, but it seems to be almost impossible to actually like find anywhere that actually has them to play them.
Yeah, the big issue with pinball as far as operations go is that it's very expensive to maintain. It's not like an arcade game where you just walk up and Windex a screen and clean off the joystick every once in a while. You have to do a lot of maintenance and preventative maintenance to keep a pinball game running nicely, and that requires somebody who's really dedicated to pinball as a concept. And many operators, they have phased it out because of the high maintenance costs. In the day, they would have technicians that only did pinball, and they would go from site to site and fix the games. But over the years, that has really dropped off. And if you look at the earnings of a typical pinball versus, say, a driving game, the driving game's going to earn a whole lot more in a much shorter period of time than a pinball will. So from an operation standpoint, it's a tough sell. It's got to be somebody who really loves it. So I'm really glad that there are barcades, and even the airport operator, that's really pretty unusual. In my area, we've got a private club, and we've got several which are at a bar. We have one operator who's really super dedicated to pinball, and then we've got a couple of smaller folks who put their stuff, they're equally dedicated in bars and so forth, but not very much around here either, and that's pretty typical throughout the U.S., I think.
Sure. Yep, that makes sense. So anyway, Joe, let me ask you, since you're since the first time covering pinball, a pinball game in this podcast, would you have any history of pinball? Like, how do you like it or don't like it?
I love pinball. To me, it is the most complex yet simplest form of gaming. You have a table with all sorts of mechanical stuff inside, and that us average people don't understand or can comprehend. But yet, the idea of pinball, there is a steel ball that just is launched onto the playfield, and you flip those flippers. Half the time you don't even know what you're doing. You're just flipping the flippers. You don't want it to fall in between. And it's loads and loads of fun. I remember going to Chuck E. Cheese, which was a good portion of my experience as far as pinballs went. Chuck E. Cheese used to have like 2 or 3 that'd be available. One of the big ones would be Addams Family, which is still to this day one of my favorite tables. And the other was Star Trek: The Next Generation. And as far as some of my newer tables, because there's some great tables in the 80s like Pinbot and what's the one with the car,
High Speed.
Thank you. I love those games as well. And around Greg and I, since you all know that we live relatively close to each other, Fun Spot in New Hampshire is the only place I can think of outside of Barcade in Providence, Rhode Island. Fun Spot in New Hampshire is the closest place that you can really play pinball and at the full experience. They have, I think, over 100 pinball machines, and I mean, you name it. If it was popular, they have it, and they have some of the older games like Central Park, and there was another one that's like Central Park that they have as well. So they have, they have a pretty good variety, and I'll go up to New Hampshire just to do that.
Yeah, I believe they have
300 to 400 games that are there.
Right,
you know what I mean? And
exactly,
just play them pinball.
I believe they have I believe they have a working Hercules too, as a matter of fact.
Yes, yeah, that's prominent. Almost as soon as you walk in the door, it's right there in front of you.
Right,
largest pinball machine ever made. Blah blah.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, I'm sure. Playing it is ridiculous. I think I attempted it, I think, twice, and I was just like, it's just too big.
I've heard that. Yeah, it's like I've definitely heard that. It's like people have said like it's all style. It's all style, like gameplay.
Right.
As far as that goes. So I've never played one, unfortunately. It's been a long time, but like I said, it's been a fun spot. But Star Trek Next Generation, I agree with you. That's probably my favorite pinball table, bar none. It's just an amazing table. But
it's a great table.
Being a Star Trek fan anyway, but the actual the game modes, the game modes and the voices and the gameplay is just like so good on that table. But so there is an event that's usually done in Massachusetts every year. It's an arcade expo, a traveling pinball convention. I don't remember the exact name of it.
It's Fantastic New England.
Yes, so
there you go.
They obviously didn't have it last year because of the pandemic, but
I just got a notice that they're planning to have it in November of this year.
November, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we definitely
nice.
should go to that, Joe, because that's a blast. They have like hundreds of pinball games all set there for like free play. So from like going back from like really old stuff like in the 30s up to like brand new tables. So all set for free play. So just like you have to just your like your pass, your 2-day pass or whatever just covers the cost of that. So but that's a great chance to be able to like play pinball. So and that's really where I discovered a couple of years ago, talking about like the tables themselves. That's where that's really where I discovered just how important that that like nudging, that bumping a table is, because it's like because in the past as a kid, it's like I never did that because it's like two reasons. One, it's like as a kid, money's precious for you. You're not gonna like waste a quarter on a game and then like be tilted like right away on it and lose your money. I mean like no kids like to do that, but second also the fact that some arcade operators are very, very possessive about the tables. So so it was that there actually was somebody there at the expo last time I went that was like like it's okay to do this on these tables because they're designed to do that. So and since they're on free play, it's like well, as long as nobody was waiting, waiting behind me, I would take two chances of the table. First table, I would just mess around with it and experiment with it and try to find how sensitive the table was, because some tables you can like mug almost and like the tilt like won't go off, and whereas other tables you like so much like breathe on it and like tilts on you. So it's like you gotta discover like how the tolerance is for each table, whatnot. But then the second game, once I learned that, the second game I played on was actually like my real game. It's like that's what separates. That's where I learned. That's what separates really the novice players and expert players. It's like that careful strategic use of like the general like slap of the hand or bump of the arm or whatever to nudge the ball just enough to get it like out of the way, because it's like there's that Nick, maybe there's a pinball specific term for this, but that like the technical term where it's like you see the ball going right down the center of the center, and you know it's going to drain like you bump it. So it's like being able to identify that and knowing just how much to bump on it. That's a really critical aspect of pinball play. I never really got to that point. All those years playing pinball, and I never really realized it like that day. So
I listened to the Jaguar Game by Game podcast where Shinto was talking about Pinball Dreams, I believe. And
I know that episode.
He mentioned something which I thought was pretty appropriate, and that's that the listeners might not be familiar with pinball as a concept, which is not, I'm so seeped in it every day that I don't really think about it. But if anybody's listening and isn't aware, pinball is a game, as Joe mentioned, it's mechanical. You have a physical steel ball that rolls on a playfield, which is typically plywood. And you're hitting targets, small things on the playfield which interact with the ball in some way. So they might just be vertical and they rebound the ball, but they award you points or score for hitting them. Or they might be things like a kick-out saucer where you land the ball into it. It sits there for a moment and then kicks it out at a particular angle. So the way the game is designed is going to influence how the ball travels. And because of that randomization of the steel ball actually moving in physical space, it's different than a video game where especially an arcade game, where there are typically patterns to memorize. In pinball, there are shots that you want to make, but the likelihood of you doing that is usually inversely proportional to the designer's intent and the number of ways to win. So in games from, say, the 1950s, there were typically 3, 4, 5, even 6 different ways to win. And you might get really close on 4 out of 6 of them, but never quite win on any of them. And in my mind, those electromechanical games are really the pinnacle of that type of design. And it's very interesting to me that they were able to create so many different scenarios like that so long ago. And that design, I idea has carried forward to modern times in different ways. So as the years progressed, they included more elements like ramps where the ball will be elevated above the physical playing surface, or flashing or strobing lights. Things like color-changing LEDs, which will illustrate which shots you need to make at which time, and various complex bits of software, and of course fancier and fancier score displays. In the initial earliest days of the early 30s, you had to manually tally your own score. Mechanical totalizers came after that, then lighted scoring, score reels, and eventually the alphanumeric displays and numeric displays of the 80s, and onto dot matrix displays of the 90s, and now there are full LCD displays for the scoring. So it's pinball as a concept is pretty interesting, and the history is really fascinating.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Anybody out there who has any kind of interest in games, history, whatever. I mean, like, video game history is interesting, I think, but pinball history is fascinating to me because, like, it's really the ups and downs and struggles and tribulations that the industry's had over the years. I highly recommend anybody out there who's interested to definitely just, like, grab a book, grab a good article on it, like online. There's plenty of information out there, like, about the history of pinball. So
I may have a good recommendation at the end of this podcast. So,
so is the pinball still made out of steel? I didn't realize that.
Yep.
Okay.
Traditional pinball, or modern pinball, I should say, the ball is 1 1/16 of an inch. In the older games, it was 1 1/8, and especially in the gambling pinballs, where that's my particular fascination. That's 1 1/8, typically.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. And nowadays there's still two companies making pinball tables. Like, is that correct?
There's quite a few now.
Okay.
There have been more and more. So the ones which are shipping games, there is Stern Pinball in Illinois, Jersey Jack Pinball, which was in New Jersey and is relocated to Illinois.
Boo.
Multimorphic, which is my personal favorite. They are in Texas. That's where I've released my commercial games. So, and there are a few other players. Spooky Pinball in Wisconsin, outside of Illinois. So they're kind of in that bubble up there. And then Dutch Pinball overseas. Those are the only companies shipping games, but there are a few other companies who've described intent to create games as well. So
cool. Okay. Yeah. Not familiar with, like, Stern, Jersey Jacks. I hadn't realized that other companies had joined the fray in more recent years. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, so we are looking at another pinball game that came out in that came on the Super NES, like this podcast, and, like, knowing Nick's love for pinball and everything, and his knowledge and whatnot, it was a natural choice to ask him to come back to the podcast to talk about a game. We decided to look at a game that none of us, I believe that's correct, had played before in the past.
No, this was definitely new.
Yeah, new to me as well. Yeah.
This looks like the most interesting game on the system to cover. So that's why I picked this one. It's a game called Battle Pinball. So there are eight Super NES pinball games that came out during the lifetime of the console. 4 of them were American, 4 of them were Japanese only. So we've already covered in this podcast 3 out of 4 of the American releases. Those would be Pinball Dreams, Pinball Fantasies, and Super Pinball. So if anybody wants to hear about those games, look in the archives. Nick joined us in the first 2 of those. Ferg from the Noise Game by Game podcast with us for Super Pinball. So the last American pinball game is called Timon and Pumbaa's Jungle Games, which is kind of like a Lion King inspired ripoff, bunch of, like, mini pinball games on it. So in Japan, there was a sequel to Super Pinball called Super Pinball 2 Amazing Odyssey, which may have to look at it at some point in the future because that also looks pretty good. But there was a game called American Battle Dome, which is kind of like a free. It looks like a 3-player kind of like Pong-ish version of pinball, where it's like it's a Pong table, but instead there's flippers. Like
is it like
inside? So.
Warlords or something?
Yeah, kind of similar to Warlords in design, like except it's done with flippers. It looks pretty interesting. So, there was Jackie Crush, which is part of the same legacy of games, like the Alien Crush, Demon Crush games. And then finally there's this game, Battle Pinball, which we're looking at here today. So, Battle Pinball is a combination pinball game with some action elements thrown into it. So it's kind of it's kind of a hard game to describe exactly what it is. So because it is pinball, but then in a way it's not pinball. So so let me get into the technical information on this first. This game was developed in 1994, published in 1995. It was done by a company called Banpresto, which was a very large Japanese publisher of the time. They were around from it looks like 1990 to like 2009. So many games across many systems: Game Boy, NES, Super NES, MSX, Arcade, PlayStation, Turbo CD, etc. Most of their games were Japan only. They only had a few games came out in North America. Joe, you might have played this one, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, like Genesis, like was one of their games.
Yep.
So that's one of their. There was also Air Gout in the arcades in 1996. And just going down the list here like real quick. Super Robot Taisen for the Game Boy Advance, Lupin the Third for the PS2. Those are Super Robot Taisen 2 again for Game Boy. And Wacky Races in the arcade of 2008. Those are the only games that came out in North America that this company made. So definitely a very Japanese-only company. So
yeah, they specialize in the Ultraman, Kamen Rider, and
a lot of licensed stuff. Yes,
and Gundam
games.
Stuff, which is more popular there than it is here. So that's why we didn't see a lot of these games.
Exactly,
they made.
Right.
Does the band in Banpresto stand for Bandai? By any chance?
I don't know.
That's a good question.
Because Bandai owns the copyright for Gundam,
right?
And I'm wondering. I don't know about Ultraman or Kamen Rider, but yeah, I was just curious because I thought these might all be licensed Bandai properties.
They might be. Yeah. Makes sense. So this pinball game itself, and I didn't know this until I started to research on it, is actually part of a franchise. This is part of the Compati, or the Great Battle series. So this is a series of games that's all loosely connected to one another, all put out by the same company. From 1990 until 2015. So they're all loosely connected in the same franchise. It's like. And they're called that because it's like these are all like the characters in the games are all the characters in the games like all the same. So we have like the first game was like SD Battle of Mazu, the NES 1990, and then you also have like the Great Battle, like Hero Senkai, Battle Soccer, Great Battle Cyber, Battle Baseball, Great Battle 3, Battle Crusher, so on and so on. So they're all very loosely connected together because the same company developed them, and also because a lot of same characters appear in the game. And this one's true too for that. It's like I think a big reason why this game never came out in North America at the time was because most of these characters, these characters were known by Westerners at the time. So
right.
I recognize some of the characters now. I know who they are because more recent years they've been brought over to the West. We know who they are, but. Back in 1995, everybody back in 1995, everybody would have been like, "Who are these people?" So, this is a very Japanese designed pinball game as far as that goes.
Also, I just wanted to jump in real quick and confirm: Banpresto is owned by Bandai. It's an extension of Bandai.
Great,
So.
got it. Yeah, so
that makes sense.
Yep, that makes sense. So, but yeah, so As far as the game itself, I did not find so a lot of the games in English, so like you don't really need to as you're able to figure out what's going on in the game. Plus, also Pinball, it's like there's not really a need for like any kind of heavy story-based stuff anyway. I mean,
yet they tried here.
Well, yeah, there is a story. I have no idea. I have no idea what it is because this game's pretty obscure. We'll talk about this later on with pricing, but nobody's translated this ROM. Nobody's really done any kind of nobody's really done any kind of like deep write-up on this game either. For that matter, so like fine. So most of the Japanese the game isn't the story of this game, which I have no idea what it says, but it's like I get the impression that it's like you're controlling a hero trying to defeat a villain because there is a boss fight like in each table. So
I actually did Google Translate in real time with my phone with this. So if you're interested in the story, yeah, I've made good use of that in recent years because I've been playing more Japanese stuff. But are you interested in the story? It's exactly three lines long. All right. The first line, group of heroes. The second line, help the heroes. The third line, hello. I suspect the third one might be a mistranslation, but on that third one, it's worth noting that it says hello, and there are a pair of red eyes, like a demon or something. It reminds me of the box art for the Guardian Legend for the NES.
Okay,
if you're familiar with that.
Yep, I am.
So not something I would expect to say hello, but there you have it.
Right, but yeah. So once you get past that, though, everything on the game screen like is in English. So thank God. But because the game screen is pretty standard for a pinball game. You have like the score, the current bonus, the current bonus in play as well as the multiplier. There's also the number of balls left, and there's also something called the field bonus. So maybe you can help me on this, Nick. My impression of the field bonus was like how much bonus points are possible to earn on that table. By that time, that's what it seemed like.
I wasn't able to figure that out, so
yeah,
kind of hoping that you would have the answer to that one.
Yeah, but, that's my best guess. Is what this plays what it is. Yes, so like a total, like total number of points that you get for bonus for clearing the table. So that's what it seems like that it is. But so game options are pretty limited. You are able to pick the you're able to pick the table that you want to start at the start of the game. But and then that point you just go in sequential order as you advance through each table. I counted 6 tables in the game. Nick, did your own gameplay seem to confirm that?
I only saw 4.
4, okay.
However,
it's a little confusing to try to figure out what's part of what screen's part of what table. So
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you? Did you finish any tables? Did you complete any boss battles? Either of you?
Yes, I did. Yep,
you did.
I completed the guy that separates into 3 different pieces with the tanks rolling on the bottom. I beat that one.
Okay. I did not finish a single one, so I was curious if maybe if you finished one, it would open up an additional table, or maybe that was.
No, I also counted 4. Okay. I don't know where Greg's getting the extra ones.
I'm getting the extra ones because Nick's right. If you do finish all 4 tables, it does unlock like a final table for you.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Yeah. So with the final boss per se that you have to fight. So but yeah. So this game is pretty hard to describe. To describe because like I said before, it's kind of a combination of like action fighting stuff with like pinball. Nick, do you have do you maybe have a summary that might be a little bit more concise than what I'm struggling to come up with?
It's if you imagine a pinball machine where all of the physical switches are replaced with moving targets. So they're little animated characters walking around, and you have to hit them pretty much. There are a couple of static targets. For example, there's one stage where there are switches that you can hit on one side of one of the playfields, or there's another one where you have to knock out bricks, kind of like Breakout or Warlords. But aside from those, pretty much everything that you are hitting with the ball is some kind of moving character element.
That's a very good way of putting it. Yes, thank you. So, before I ask Nick, because I'm sure Nick his thoughts on the game, because I'm sure that Nick probably has a lot of information to share with us. Let me just give my thoughts on the game like real quick. This is very kooky, but it's also kooky and weird, but it's also fun. I definitely had fun playing this. It's hard. This is a very hard pinball game. It definitely takes some trial and error, definitely takes some luck, definitely takes some patience. But I like the aspect of like trying to hit the moving targets and trying to advance, because the tables themselves are made up like 2 or 3 screens. So and the actual boss battle at the end is a very nice touch to the game. I thought it's a very interesting. There was a very interesting idea about combining action, more skill, more arcade elements like a pinball game. So whether or not it works, I'll leave it up to you guys to decide. But I happen to like it. I think it's I thought it was like a pretty good concept. Graphics are very good. They're very detailed, cute, colorful, very nice. Music was also like pretty good. I wish you had additional flippers, because you only have the 2 flippers and the 2 main flippers on the bottom to use. But and there were some cheap deaths, I think. I think because of that. But all in all, this is a pretty fun game for anybody looking for like a different take on pinball. So, Joe, what do you think about the game like overall?
I actually really like this game. I went into this not expecting to, not so much not like it, but not to have as much fun as I did. Each table or that playfield just pops off the screen. It's so colorful. And there's stuff going on everywhere. Like the first couple times I would play the tables, because I did alternate through the tables even if I couldn't complete them. I got to see all the cool little animations, and I'd see the little details, like there's this one point where like there's like little blades of grass that are actually like swaying in the wind, which I thought was really cool. Nice little touches, stuff like that. It's just like, I don't know, like I was used to like pinball in the NES, and like I've played Devil's Crush and stuff like that, so I know that there could be potential there. But for the most part, like pinball's your standard pinball game, you know what I mean? And this actually, surprised me. I played this more than I thought I was going to. I probably put a good 2 hours into it. Just playing around and looking at all the levels. Like I wanted to see everything that I possibly could. The boss battles were pretty tough though.
Yes, so they are.
I got through, there's this one where like this guy, gets into like multiple layers, and he floats around, kind of circulates a little bit, and you got tanks that get in your way that'll, they're, I guess, supposed to help you, but if the ball hits them, it just knocks the ball back at you, which does not help.
Right.
Yeah, and then, it was a fun little fight, you know what I mean? And it's like you said, the arcadey part of it, being brought into what would be a traditional pinball, just kind of makes this game. And obviously the license helps as well. But yeah, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, as long as you know that as long as you know, the characters that this is all from, it definitely helps your enjoyment factor. It's not necessary, but it does help.
Right.
So, so Nick, I'm sure this is a very different pinball game from anything you probably played before in the past, right?
Yeah, so the concept that's most similar would be another Japan-only game called Pinball of the Dead.
Oh, I've heard of that one. Yes. Okay.
That's for the Game Boy Advance.
Yes. Yep.
But in modern days, there are digital games made by Zen Pinball for their Pinball FX digital platform, and they have some of these type of moving elements that the ball interacts with, and multiple play fields and so on. So I think that might be the actual closest analog to this that has been released in the West, and those are available on Steam or any other modern PC.
Yeah, those are great collections. I love those collections. Yeah.
And console platform. But yeah.
Yeah.
So I have notes about each of the tables. Do you all have something like that, or can I get into some of the nitty gritty here?
Go right ahead, sir. I mean, like, your knowledge and impressions of these games is definitely amazing. So, so you've always done a great job in the past with pinball games. So, please feel free to hit us with anything that you've got.
Well, I just like to take notes, and so, the first one I started with was Ultraman, and on Ultraman, you're smashing a boulder and fighting a monster which seems to be invading a cityscape. And I don't have a deep familiarity with any of these properties, so that's gonna perhaps make my write-ups a little confusing here. But if you hit the monster which hatches from this boulder over and over again, you'll eventually destroy it. It will eventually show back up, and you'll have to keep fighting it. And if you free there's some Ultraman clone, or maybe it's Ultraman himself, I'm not really sure, but they'll show up on the right side, the right return lane, and then push you up into the next screen, the next playfield. On the next screen, it's another cityscape. It's a little more worn down, and if I recall correctly, this is the one that has a cross ramp that's going from left to right.
Yes. Yeah.
And kind of a building on the right side. And there's this interesting coiled dragon thing on the left-hand side. And if you hit that, it will uncoil and alter the ball's path. If you hit it, it'll act like a ball guide and kind of shoot the ball off in a particular area. If you hit that ramp that crosses the playfield, it will drop the ball into the currently lit lane. So there are 3 different return lanes on the right-hand side, and when you knock them all out, it awards you some points, and then will... I don't have a note here, but I think it will also free an Ultraman, which will allow you to progress to the next screen automatically.
Yes, that's right.
Hit the ball in a particular area. There's also a house or a building on the left-hand side right next to the cross ramp, and that has a little hidden kick-out. So if you land the ball in that, it'll launch the ball up into the third screen automatically. So my strategy for that one was to shoot up to the left and then kind of land back into the house, and it'll kick the ball up to the third. Your goal in each of these tables is to progress through 3 playfields until you get to the boss on the 4th playfield. So trying to find the most efficient way there was kind of a puzzle and kind of fun. And then the last playfield, the upper playfield, was kind of a construction zone. And in this one, there's like a statue of a scorpion on the right-hand side. And if you hit that enough times, a series of mine carts will appear. And for each of the tables there on this last playfield, there's a way to start the boss battle with multi-ball. And in this one, the way you do it is to load up those mine carts. So you have to load up 2 on the left, and then to actually start the boss battle, you hit 1 in the mine cart on the right. But if you can start the boss battle at any time by hitting that minecart on the right. But if you load up the other 2 first, you start with 3 balls, and so that's a bit of an advantage. The boss battle is the robot that splits into different parts and starts moving back and forth with the tanks that Joe was mentioning. So that one I didn't finish. I didn't finish any boss battle, so hats off to you. I found the boss battles very challenging. And one thing that's really interesting is that you don't lose your ball in any of these... I keep pointing to say machines, but in any of these tables, because unless you drop down through the bottom ball return of the bottom playfield. So if you drop from the boss area, you just have to complete that upper playfield sequence again unlock the minecart, go back in, fight again. If you drop down to the middle area, you can go back up to the top, and so on and so forth. So you don't immediately lose. In that way, I think it's really fair, but it's just really challenging. And that boss battle, you have about 1/15 of a second to acclimate yourself before you really start having to fight for your life, so to speak. So that's all I had for Ultraman. Did you all have anything to add?
Multi-ball is definitely very helpful with the boss fights. I could not beat them without multi-ball, so it definitely is worth taking the time to load up your balls beforehand, like you said. So, but yeah, so this table is not my favorite, but it's a good table. I think it's definitely challenging.
I really liked, you all had mentioned the graphics and the integration of the cityscape with paths that the ball can take.
Yes,
I thought was really great.
Right. Yeah, it is. So, I also really love the fact that all these tables actually have multiple playfields because it's there's not many because there's not many pinball games that do that either. It's video pinball. There's a few that do that. But it's I always love a pinball game where it's 2 or 3 playfields all on the same table. There's where it's start off at 1, go to number 2, go to number 3, whatever. So the only way you can do that so there are some tables that do that in real life, physical tables where it's there's the different playfield areas.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of that. I can see that.
Haunted House or Black Hole.
Yep, that's one.
I was gonna say Black Hole's the one that comes to mind.
Flash Gordon, Black Knight. There's a series of them, but there's a trade-off because you're talking about physical space, so they have to be stacked on top of one another. Black Hole and Haunted House, in my opinion, did it the best. Black Hole, there's a lower playfield, so the ball actually travels down to a playfield that's below the main one, but you can still see all of the regular playfield at any time. Haunted House, part of that playfield is covered up by a third playfield, which rises above the main playfield. And then Black Knight, Flash Gordon, Game of Thrones. There's a variety of different games that have an upper playfield component, and those ones typically cover a large portion of the main playing surface. And those I find are less appealing to me because so much of that the ball's path that it travels or can travel is either restricted or disappears for long periods of time, and it becomes a little confusing. It makes it easy to lose a ball if you don't know where it is physically on the surface.
Yes, I agree with most of that. Game of Thrones, I thought, however, did that very well. They were able to get around some of the limitations, I thought, because I played that game quite a bit during the last expo I was at. So, you spend most of your time on the upper playfield, which helps, I think, because the ball is not constantly traveling back and forth between them. So, it's I think that because, so it seems the game designers kind of learned some of the lessons from the past and kind of change that a little bit to make it easier.
Yeah.
Just my own personal experience.
The worst for that, in my opinion, is Black Knight 2000. It's got...
Yes, I agree with you on that. Yep.
One of the best soundtracks in pinball, but...
Definitely. Yeah.
Unfortunately, the ball is obscured large percentage of the time, and some of the shots are very close on that lower playfield, so it makes it a mean playing game, but not necessarily a fair to the player game, because there's so much hidden. But these... I agree with you. Having in a digital space, you can have as many playfields as you want. You can extend to infinity. So I'm glad that they took advantage of that with each of these and designed separate and distinct, I think that's important, areas that the ball can travel to that have different goals on each section. I thought that was a really nice touch.
Yes, agree.
So next in the list that I have here is Gundam. Gundam is a space battle anime, and this is kind of a space themed pinball. And so on the lower area, you have kind of 3 large monsters or robots, and then 3 smaller ones, and you can blow them up just by hitting them. The middle area is where I found a lot of fascinating interaction with the ball. So there's like a crashed spaceship or capsule or something on the left-hand side. And it's kind of in the spot where that house was that I was talking about in Ultraman. And it's also got the same feature. It's actually a hidden scoop. So you can land in the front of that, and it will either kick the ball into the upper area, or, as I found accidentally, it'll start a instant multi-ball. Did either of you start that multi-ball?
I did not. I actually did not know about that.
I don't know exactly what triggered it, and part of that, Greg had mentioned that there's not much Japanese, and that's certainly true in the interface, like where it tells you the number of balls remaining and so forth. But occasionally there'll be like some creature or something that wanders past with the sign in Japanese, and have no idea what any of those said. But in this case, I don't recall any sign, but there is a set of rollovers in the upper right, and I'm wondering if I cleared those first and then landed in the capsule. That's about the only thing that makes logical sense to me. But at any rate, the problem with multi-ball in these areas is that there's intense Super NES slowdown when there's multi-ball. The balls can actually travel freely between each of the areas. If you lose the balls in multi-ball in a boss fight, they're just gone. So that's how they prevented the slowdown in those, is that they limited the amount that the Super Nintendo had to remember and render.
Right.
But in this main area, I see why they didn't use that gimmick very frequently. At least this was the only table that I was able to start like an instant multi-ball anywhere on. And it's just because of the slowdown. It made it almost impossible to play, really, until I lost 2 of the balls. But I thought it was a cool touch. Once you get back... Oh, another thing that the ship can do, I have a note here. If you land in that ship, sometimes it'll return the ball to the shooter lane. So it kind of acts as a free ball gate in games from, say, the 70s. There's a little wire form that will open up beside the shooter lane. That's where the ball sits when it's waiting for you to launch it. And the ball can return back to the shooter lane to be reshot. So kind of an interesting concept, being able to return from an upper playfield back to that area. The upper playfield, it reminded me of the Death Star. Did it remind you all of that?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it did.
I don't know if that's, if there's a Death Star-like thing in the anime. I have to assume there is, but anyway, there's this huge Death Star, and you're firing at these stand-up targets, which appear on both sides of this upper playfield and kind of around the screen. And there are different moving targets which you can hit, which redirect the ball. And your goal, once you knock all those out, there are cannons which are firing on the Death Star, and you have to knock those out as well. Once you do that, then 3 portals open up on the Death Star, and that's how you start your multi-ball. You can either fire right into the center one to immediately go to your boss battle, or hit the left and right side. The boss looks like a giant Gundam suit, and it's some... my note says some kind of weird X. So, I have no idea what that is, but it was pretty interesting and killed me almost immediately. So, were either of you able to get through this one?
No, and I actually agree with you. Agree with you big time about big time about this table. This is probably my favorite table as far as like looks and design. I love the whole concept of it. Mm-hmm. But the slowdown really made it unplayable, playable multi-ball. So because between that and the boss fight, this ended up being my least favorite table to play, as a matter of fact, because of that. Unfortunately,
I actually will agree with that. The slowdown really killed this table, and I felt this was one of the most difficult tables because of the slowdown, which didn't add to the enjoyment at all. And I did get to the boss fight, but again, as you said, the flying X's and him bouncing around and shooting lasers from his nether region. Yeah, I ended up dying. This is definitely it was a boss fight I thought I could win, and then it quickly showed me that I could not.
It was really tough. I was surprised. This is the one that I thought was the best designed overall, but the boss
Yes.
fight was almost unplayable, I thought. But
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree. Totally.
Okay, so next up, do you know what the underwater hero is?
I don't, unfortunately.
No,
I tried to find
don't.
out, but it's like without knowing the. But yeah, so I'm not a big anime person to begin with, so it's like I don't know. Maybe somebody out there who knows anime would recognize it, but unfortunately, that's not me.
It reminded me of Aquaman dressed as a unicorn.
Yes.
So if that rings a bell for anybody, that's what it was. But I have no idea what it was either. So this is an underwater table. This is the third one. And there are sea stars, which act as kind of like fidget spinners on the playfield. You hit them and they start rotating. And they redirect the ball, and that's it's pretty cool. The moving targets, or the targets which are stationary but they're character-based, are fish or jellyfish. And this table has a 3-phase skill shot, so depending on how hard you launch the ball, it'll either return to your right flipper, it will launch out into the table, or it will immediately launch into the second playfield, the mid playfield. The mid playfield has some sharks, and there's a ball save post and a ball return gate. Those allow you to continue playing, basically, in that area. Oh, one thing I didn't mention in either of the previous ones is there is a ball save post, and that's an up post that appears between the flippers, which will appear on the lowest level that you can qualify by doing something. I don't know if it's clearing targets on the lower playfield or what exactly. I was able to qualify it on pretty much every table, though, so I don't unfortunately know what qualifies it, but there is a way to prevent your ball from draining immediately down the center, and it'll essentially redirect your ball to the left or right, allowing you to shoot. So on the mid playfield, there is a blowfish in the upper left, and if you land in this blowfish, it's got a hole in the top of it, which is very odd, but that launches you into the upper playfield. On the right-hand side of this mid playfield, there's a turnaround that is covered, kind of like Black Knight 2000 that I was mentioning earlier. So the ball whips around there really fast, and it's pretty cool. I like the way that this playfield is designed, this mid playfield especially for this one. The upper playfield has a ray, like a manta ray or a stingray, and some kind of, I wrote large fish. I'm not sure what kind of fish it is. And they are the moving targets. There's some sort of weird hotel, which is the entrance to the boss fight. And you qualify that by, I didn't make it to the boss fight here, I don't think. Yeah, I didn't make it there. So I'm not sure what qualifies it. I don't know if you have to knock out the ray and the fish. But there's 3 doors into the hotel, and I assume they function as the multi-ball qualifier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. That's what you do, because I got to the boss like this one. So if you did not get to the boss, I can help you out with that. The boss of this one is like a giant catfish, basically. It looks like sorry, pufferfish. But he's got like a antenna to his head with like a ball at the end of it. That's the ball that he attacks you with.
It's a anglerfish.
Anglerfish? Yeah.
Anglerfish. Yeah. Blowfish, anglerfish. Yep. That's it. So. Not that hard of a boss fight. Just getting to him, I agree with you, was challenging. Once you actually get to him, though, he's not that bad.
And
I couldn't get to him.
Did you qualify it by knocking out those large moving targets? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. That's what you do. So.
Well. I tried.
So I forgot to. Yeah. So I did forget to say this earlier. There is a there's a little bit of information out there on what fighting to the tables. So it's like they use one table uses Ultraman, one table uses Gundam, one table uses Kamen Rider, who's another like popular Japanese hero type. The fourth one uses a guy called Fighter Roar, who's an original character by Ben Presto. So I just don't. I'm just not sure. I think this underwater one uses. I think this underwater guy is Fighter Roar. I'm not sure because
it is. Yeah,
Kamen Rider.
The last one
could be underwater, but
the last one is Kamen Rider. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. The underwater one is Fighter Roar, which was just they created
the original.
It. Yep. And honestly, like in my opinion, the playfield shows that. Like there's a lot less going on. It's very bland. I aesthetically, I did not enjoy this level. Like I just felt that it was boring, not much going on compared to the other levels.
Yeah.
And I did watch a YouTube video of the boss fight, and I wish it was a little easier to get to the boss fight because the boss fight at least looked fun. But
it is a fun fight.
The lower levels
so I agree with you.
of this just are so bland. I just could not get into it.
So out of the 4 tables, this was number 3 for me. It's like, not my least favorites, but like, toward the bottom.
Yeah.
So because the same reasons that Joe and Nick like already mentioned.
So ready to move on to Kamen Rider?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
All right. So this is the last of the tables that I got to, and that Kamen Rider is a hero that is very similar to Ultraman in my mind.
Yes, he is. Yep.
So the style of this table is kind of similar to Ultraman, except instead of in a city, it takes place in like only a construction site. Sort of. So there's train tracks on the left, and there are 3 physical switches that you can hit, and if you complete them all and then manage to land a ball on that left side, it will immediately take you up to the uppermost play field so that you can get ready to fight the boss, which I thought was pretty cool, but it was pretty much a magic trick to be able to do it. I did it once accidentally. And the mid play field, you can plunge directly from the lower playfield directly onto the mid playfield. This is one of the only ones aside from the underwater one that allows you to do that. There's a spider beetle thing, which is marching towards the flippers constantly. And one of the things that we haven't talked about, but I liked about this game, was that there are things which can interact and disable your flippers temporarily.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is one of those monsters, and if it gets too close to your flippers, it'll shoot off spider webs, and they lock up your flippers for a time. And the reason I think this is cool is because it doesn't kill you right away. You go back down to the lower playfield, and then you can shoot your way back up. Right. So it's not like really super unfair or anything like that. But it only takes that monster maybe 5 seconds to make that march down to your flippers each time. So you've got to constantly be hitting it with the pinball, or trying to fire up past it to get up to the upper playfield, which is pretty challenging. Unless on the right-hand side there's like a building, and if you knock out all the windows, then Kamen Rider will appear up above this beetle thing, and if you hit the ball towards Kamen Rider, he'll take it and kick it or drive it up to the next playfield. So on the upper playfield, there's a beetle thing which is marching back and forth, and every so often it'll do this magnet attack. This is one of the only magnet type ball interactions that happens in the game, and you have to wait for it to finish pulling the ball towards you, and eventually it'll release the ball. Now, I never had the ball actually go straight down between the flippers after it released the ball. Did either of you have that experience?
Are you kidding me?
Not me.
I was just wondering if it was even possible. I wonder if it's designed in such a way that the magnet doesn't fire unless it's got a safe return to one of the flippers, which I thought was a very nice touch, very thoughtful for the player.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So you know what? Guys, I apologize. I wrote the wrong notes on how to get into the boss fight on this one and the Ultraman. This is the one where you hit the scorpion statue, and it reveals the train cars. So I actually don't know how you get into the boss on Ultraman. Sorry about that. But the boss itself, this is the one that I came closest to completing. It's some kind of animal which is controlling this giant statue which has a variety of faces, and you have to knock out each of the faces. I knocked out all but one and then lost the ball, so
that sucks.
Were either of you able to complete this one?
Yes, this one I completed. For me personally, personally, this is my favorite table out of the four. I definitely had a lot of fun with this one. I thought it was fun and challenging without being like impossible.
Punishing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I don't think. I don't think. I don't think this table was difficult as some of the other tables. The element about having to defeat the guy before we got down to your flippers was cool. So, and the boss fight I think was the easiest out of the four. I definitely, for me personally at least, like I said, I definitely had the most fun with this table. This is my favorite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. Just from a design perspective, I thought it was great the way that there were multiple ways to get to each of the playfields. I really like that, and it shows a lot of thought on the developers' part that they were able to design those different entrances and exits.
Yeah, so like I said before, if you beat all four tables, you're taken to a fifth table, which is a boss fight. You just simply, that's all it is. It's just a boss fight.
Mm-hmm.
I will post, if you want to look at this, guys, I'll post a link to a YouTube video in the chat right now, which goes through, which is time coded directly to that fight. So you can see it. So, so that final boss fight is pretty challenging. You're trying to defeat a number of side enemies on the side, and then hit the actual clown robot guy in the center with your ball. And there's gravity effects, so and it also makes it challenging is the fact the flippers are at the top of the screen instead on this one. So it's almost kind of like upside down pinball here.
Yeah. So this reminds me of a couple of different competitive machines. The most famous being Gottlieb's Challenger, which was an electromechanical game where two players could play simultaneously, and they have a pair of flippers which are fighting each other, so it's a true battle pinball. But of note is in this boss fight there's a sign that says Pinbo. Pinbo is the name of an elephant in the Pinball Circus. Pinball Circus is a machine that never made it to full production. There's only I believe 2 of them that are left. One of them is at the Pinball Hall of Fame in Las Vegas, available for public play. The developers certainly had no idea of that. I believe it was developed, after this game was made, but I just found that amusing.
Oh, okay, cool. But so this is actually a pretty tricky boss fight. Only in the sense of trying to know where to actually shoot.
Mm-hmm.
So. Once you beat this, the game, you get an ending. You can keep playing, but just the tables tables higher difficulty. So, So anyway, we shared most of our thoughts and impressions on the game already. So, what do you think about the actual pinball mechanics and physics in this game itself, overall, Nick?
I thought they were pretty impressive. I've played quite a few virtual pinball games, and this one I thought maybe it's because of the fantasy or licensed elements or the moving targets. Something about it really made it appealing to play, even from a pinball perspective. The shots that they've laid out are very close to the flippers typically, but they're all pretty fun to hit. This is one of the most appealing for sure virtual pinball games that I've played, especially on the Super Nintendo. So maybe it's because they didn't try to emulate real games. Maybe that's part of it. But I really liked it. How about you?
Yeah, I thought overall it was like the physics felt pretty good. I think it's definitely challenging. I think some of the shots they're trying to ask you to make are almost impossible unless you exactly unless you know exactly how to approach it and what to do. But as far as the actual physics and mechanics and whatnot, it all seemed like pretty fair. You know, the multi-ball aspect was well handled, I thought, for the most part. It's interesting having the moving targets to hit because the action parts of the game really the action parts of the game really make this a lot more luck-based, I thought, than the usual pinball game because of that. So whether or not you enjoy that depends upon your own your perception about pinball, I think. But but yeah, overall I thought it was pretty good. It was very definitely an interesting take on pinball. So
yeah, that's a good point. Your pinball play style might have an impact on your enjoyment with this. I'm kind of an on-the-fly player, so when the ball hits the flipper, I line up my shot and let fly. But there are some people who like to hold the ball on the flipper and then really plan where they're gonna shoot, and those players might have more trouble because of all the moving elements on each playfield.
Yes, exactly. I definitely think so also. So there are a couple of cheat codes available in this game, which is kind of unusual for a pinball game.
Mm-hmm.
That they have. So one of them is you're able to change. This is curious. I don't know why they'd hide this because I mentioned before there's no option screen per se, but there is a way to be able to set some of the options of the game. So the title screen, like you push down, AY, select. That opens up a configuration screen where you can adjust the extend and the ball settings that the game uses. So like I said, why is this hidden? I don't know, but it seemed like it'd be nicer to have it actually available to the player to tweak those themselves. But but whatever, like it is what it is. So, there's also a way to continue after game over if you lose all your balls. So, this code will allow you to start back. This code will allow you to resume play at the last stage that you reached. You have to do Y, X, A, B select to do that. So, those two codes should be able to help you with some of the gameplay mechanics. Like sure. So, I mentioned before how this game is pretty obscure. There's several reasons for that. I think because obviously being Japanese only. The characters that this game uses were not really known in the West at the time. So, it doesn't appear also that it doesn't appear that this game got a pretty big print run either, for that matter. Because on eBay, there's very few copies of this game being sold. As a matter of fact, this is probably, in the history of the podcast, this is probably the hardest game to find on eBay we've covered so far in the podcast. So, like I said, I can only guess at the reasons. I think because it looks like it was probably a small print run. That may a small print run that may have been affecting it. So, or also just the fact that this game was just so popular with the fans that they just simply hoarded all the copies of it. So. I only found on eBay the time we researched on this on April 1st, a mere 2 copies of the game being listed on eBay with no copies that recently sold. So yes, a very obscure, very hard game to get a hold of. So for the copies that are listed on eBay currently, they're both from Japanese sellers. So these prices are going to include shipping for shipping for Japan. One of them was card only, and one of them was also complete. In box with the game, the manual in the box. So, the person selling the card only the selling person the card only was asking for $92. The person selling the CIB copy was wanting a whopping $320. Like this copy of the game. So yeah, very expensive. Very obscure game obscure game. Unless you're a big pinball collector or somebody who needs to have a complete system, probably best off just like playing, just playing, it's probably best off just like playing emulation for sure. So
yeah, I would highly recommend emulating this.
But yeah, so yeah, definitely. So welcome back, Joe. A little bit behind the scenes. Behind the scenes here, Joe was having a couple internet problems here, but no worries. So we finished talking about the last stage of the game, Joe, which was the
Kamen Rider.
Kamen Rider one. What'd you think about that one?
I actually really enjoyed that one. That was the one with the train tracks and all that. Yeah.
Yep.
It's such a good level. That was probably my second favorite. I really liked the Gundam one. But the slowdown kind of killed it. But this one, almost designed sort of the same way, but less slowdown. And a lot of the cool little animations I noticed, like the blades of grass that I had mentioned earlier, in the wind, was on this particular board. So I thoroughly enjoyed that level.
Yeah. Yep, definitely agree. I think for me personally, I think like this is my favorite level, with the Ultraman one being second. So all in all, I thought the tables were all pretty well designed for the most part. I thought they did some very interesting things. Some tables with different screens. I'm sure Nick, you could probably vouch for this too. They feel pretty similar, so it's like you play when you play the ball. So, but in this one, I think they did a good job of separating all of them.
Yeah. And now that I'm looking at a screenshot, Craig, I see what the field bonus is. What that is something that you get on the playfield in order to help you. So in this case, in the screenshot that I'm looking at right here, it says kickback. If your ball falls out the left out lane, then the ball will be automatically kicked back into play.
That makes sense. I don't know why I didn't make that. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't make that connection, but you're right.
It doesn't have any, like on a typical machine, there'd be some kind of verbiage somewhere, so you just have to know what kickback means.
Yes.
In this. And it also doesn't tell you how to qualify any of that stuff. There's... Your guess is as good as mine. Unfortunately, I didn't take high quality notes there, obviously.
Yeah, unfortunately... The problem with this game, like I said before in the past, is like like it's a very obscure game. There's very little information out there on it. So it's like there's a couple of good YouTube videos that show the game in play. There's a couple of brief write-ups here and there, but nobody's done an article on this game. There's nothing on Wikipedia about it. The information on this game online is very, very scarce. Period. So this is a very hard thing to research for. So, but yeah. So it's like. We just don't. I couldn't even find a copy of the manual. I mean, like nobody.
Wow.
Much less translating. Much less anybody like translating it. So it's like, I apologize for the fact we're making guesses at some of the stuff in this game, but it's like, but between it being Japanese and just being like very obscure, a lot of information we just figured out through trial and error, fortunately. So
based on my lack of skill, I only got to see, the parts that I got to see. So, I apologize that I didn't have more there, but, hopefully that gives everybody a little taste of what the tables are and gets them interested in playing it. Because I think it's well worth playing.
Yeah, definitely, and I agree with that. And like I was saying before, Nick, this is the kind of game that really would have been either impossible or very, very difficult to do in physical form.
Oh
This
yeah,
is the kind of game that really can only be done well in the like in video game format. But yeah, so I think we already pretty much shared most of our impressions on this game. Very different pinball game. If you enjoy pinball with like a bit different, a bit more luck, a bit more action to it, this one's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the Japanese of the game is minor enough that's really not going to hinder you as far as the actual the gameplay, and hopefully this podcast will also help you fill in some of the pieces as to what's going on with the gameplay and what to do and whatnot. So So Nick mentioned Nick mentioned before some examples about some other games like this one that are available to us here in the West. So check those games out also if you enjoy this kind of format for this, definitely. But do either one of you guys have any final thoughts as far as the game goes?
Yeah, just like I say, it's well worth the play. So if you have any interest in pinball or action games in general, I think it's a well put together game, and there's enough variety in here that it's worth a look at least.
Yeah, definitely.
And I second that, and I couldn't say it any better.
Awesome. But yeah, great. So always fun to cover pinball. It's always fun to cover. It's always fun to cover pinball games. It's always fun to have you on the podcast, Nick. So I want to thank you again very much for taking the time out of your day to join us here on the podcast to talk about this again.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
But we kind of teased this too. We kind of teased earlier. What are you currently working on right now, Nick? And do you have anything? At all that you want to plug or mention or advertise?
Well, Greg, I'm glad you asked. So, this is the full-on advertisement portion of the podcast. But I co-authored a book with a really good friend of mine, my best friend Ryan Clater, who is a fantastic comic illustrator on the history of pinball. So it's called Coin Op Carnival, and it's available from coinopcarnival.com. We interview the most prolific electromechanical designer. He designed a large number of games over a large number of years. He is still with us today. He's 102 years old, and he's just a fascinating person. So we were lucky enough to talk with him, and this is the first of a 4-volume series. Each volume is going to contain game reviews, interviews with designers, and technical information. So I write an article in each one detailing how the games are constructed and how those elements fit together in order to make a game that functions. On top of that, I create a lot of pinball stuff. So I have hosted a podcast for many years called For Amusement Only, and that has over 450 episodes. It's being recorded rather sporadically at the moment. My daughter has joined me as a co-host, and it's being recorded sporadically mostly because of all the other stuff that I'm doing with hobby stuff. So we just haven't had a whole lot of time to sit down and do that. But I've created homebrew games. So last time I was on, I think I was making a game called the Multi Bingo, and that had 142 individual pinball games that I've reverse engineered wire for wire and put into a single cabinet. I did the same with a series of horse racing games that's called Multi Races. Both of those I bring to pinball shows when they start happening again. I'll be doing that. At some point, I hope to make it up to Pintastic New England. So, Greg, if that happens, I'll be sure to let you know, and hopefully we can meet up. But
yeah, that'd be fun.
I also started work on a pinball platform called the P3. It's made by a company called Multimorphic, and the P3 has swappable playfield modules. They're about a third of a typical playfield size, and the rest of the playfield is a screen that the ball travels over, and it can sense anywhere that the ball is on that screen. So you can have some pretty cool ball interaction with the elements that are on the screen at the time. So if you think of like Battle Pinball, where there's something moving back and forth and you hit it with the pinball, you can do that with this P3 platform. So my first project for that was to actually redesign the game called Quest for Glory, which is a point-and-click adventure game. And I built it ground up for the P3. And that was a lot of fun and extremely complicated. But I did learn that you can, in fact, have a point-and-click adventure game with the pinball, and I thought that was pretty neat.
I'll have to Yeah, I'll have to check that out because I love Quest for Glory. Like that's my favorite favorite Sierra computer series like back in the day. I definitely spent a lot of time playing that. So
same for me. So I was very interested to do that and redid all the artwork. Took the music and reorchestrated it. Just a huge labor of love. Unfortunately, I can't sell that one because I don't own the rights to it. In retrospect,
you could contact Activision.
Maybe. I actually have a lawyer working on that at the moment. The problem is they don't respond to individual requests. So
yeah,
I had to get a lawyer involved, but and they haven't responded to them either. So.
Great.
The thing is that I just want to give it away for free, and they don't want anything to do with that, I guess, because it's not a big moneymaker for them, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. So, but
not a lot of upsides for them, basically, is what I'm saying. Anyway, but you will be able to play that at a pinball show. I can bring my copy of it, and people can give that a try. So I'll be bringing that along with the first commercial game which I produced, which is called Ranger in the Ruins. It is the second game, pinball game with internet connectivity. This is a roguelike pinball experience, as I like to call it, where when you die, the last item that you collected is carried over with your ghost, and other players all over the world can stumble across your ghost and pick up the item from it. And there are a variety of items in the game. Your overall goal is to gain the sum of human knowledge in this post-apocalyptic world and bring it back to your settlement. It's really challenging. I took some of the design influence from much older games. Some of the things which I feel have gone away over the years, like point values, which are always shown on the playfield. I really like having that because otherwise you really have no idea what's most valuable to shoot for when you walk up to a modern machine. So that's been received pretty well, and I've been working on a second game now, and my younger daughter is working with me on the rules. We're having a good time with that. That's got a very large number of call-outs, and I've hired different voice actors for that, and I'm just in the middle of alpha right now for that, and it's a very long process to go from nothing to alpha to beta, and then finally to release. So one of those experiences that you get is the things that you don't know but think you know, like how to present various data like coin data to potential players on the screen and so forth. So a lot of little elements like that, which make for a very polished release, but take a lot of time. So that's kind of where I'm at now, and I'm hoping to release more details about that soon, but not quite yet.
Okay.
But yeah, so Coin Op Carnival and RangerInTheRuins.com. Those are the two big things if you're interested.
Awesome. So do you have a website that you update with updates, or where people, or where can folks find your podcast at?
That's a good point. I was thinking about that, and I don't have one that contains all the stuff. I typically have development blogs on a website called pinside.com for each of the projects, and then the podcast is at foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Cool.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely. Wow, I mean, like my hat's off to you, dude, because that's definitely a lot of work. Very impressive, just like all the all that time and money and effort being spent on all that stuff. Definitely labor of love, like you were saying. So, I wish you all the best success, for that, going forward.
Well, thank you, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't. But yeah, I look forward to hearing what you think of that Quest for Glory, because that's it was made for someone like you. So
well, hopefully I'll be able to make it to that. Yeah, because hopefully this year the pinball the Pinball Expo in Massachusetts will happen this year, hopefully. So, like, I think you said it was going to be November this year. So hopefully I'll be able to make that.
Yeah, they just sent the dates actually right before we sat down to record. So.
Awesome!
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but
hopefully.
Yeah, but yeah, hopefully. So just finish up the podcast real quick. I forgot to mention this earlier, so I do apologize. I do want to shoehorn this. I do want to shoehorn this little bit of information in because I do think it's interesting. Because the company we mentioned earlier, Ben Presto, the company which produced this whole series of games, including like Battle Pinball, that was owned by Bandai. They actually, I forgot to mention this. They actually started back in 1977 as a company called Hawaii, and then became Coral in 1982, and then was actually bought by Bandai like 1989. They actually, as Hawaii / Corlin, they actually developed some games for Sega in the arcades. One of them being Pengo, which is a game that I love. So
Yeah.
that's actually by the company that became this company. So that's pretty cool. So
Neat.
And Ben Presto is actually no longer around. Bandai dissolved the company in 2019 and merged them into Bandai. So, Joe, how about you? If somebody wants to, if somebody wants to talk to you, how can they do so?
Oh, I don't talk to people. No, I'm just joking. You can find me on Twitter at JOESUX30, and that's really the best place to, get at me.
Awesome. All right. So, what game do you want us to look at next time, Joe? Because it's your pick.
You are going to hate me. We're going from very Japanese to very American. We're going to do the action platformer, Real Monsters, presented by Nickelodeon.
I've actually never played that game. I've actually heard some decent things about it. So I don't mind checking it out.
Yeah, spoiler, it's not that bad of a game. We're going to have fun with this. I can guarantee it.
That was cross-platform too. That was also
Yes.
Genesis. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, looking forward to it then. So thanks again as always, Joe, for joining us on the podcast. Appreciate it. And Nick again, many special thanks to you for taking time to join us again. Again, a quick look behind the scenes. We had to reschedule this from last weekend. So So Nick making time on his busy schedule, as you just heard how busy he is, to join us for this episode is very much appreciated, sir. Yeah, so thank you.
Very
again.
appreciated.
Well,
thank you.
Thanks very much for having me and for recommending this super fun game.
We'll have to have you back in a few months. Yeah, we'll have to have you back later on this year to talk about another pinball game. There's a couple of like I said before, there's a couple of pinball games out there. So the system that both they look pretty they look like pretty interesting.
Well, anytime. Thanks so much, guys.
No problem.
Sure, definitely. So thank you again, everybody out there for joining us as always. If you want to, if you have any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, etc., you can feel free to post on Facebook. We have a couple groups on there, or you also can send me an email directly to the SNES podcast at yahoo.com. There's a couple folks who stream Super NES stuff on Twitch pretty regularly, who will post on Facebook like when they're live, so check that out. It's great to have people like actually twitching like older games too, as well, not and not just like modern stuff. I love that; it's great. So
yeah,
I definitely want to support those guys, like if possible. So, but So as always, we appreciate you listening to the podcast. Thanks again as always, and I hope everybody out there stays safe. As well, and takes care of yourself, and we'll talk to you again soon, hopefully. Later, all.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. For power.